Who was that, John? Who was that? Some of your buddies? Good evening. It's right at 6 o'clock. This is the tentative budget hearing schedule tonight, or the hearing on the budget for 2014. It is September 2nd, 2014, and as my friend Steve Mock would say, the Royals are still in first place. So with that, Mahesh, shall we get right started into this, or do you want to introduce Doug?
Do roll
Still
call
want to take
first.
roll call?
Yes, please.
I ask the city clerk to call a roll, please.
Jason Green. Here. Alderman Van Buskirk.
Here.
Alderman Josh Green.
Here.
Alderman Ertz.
Here.
Alderman Azier.
Excused.
Alderman Mock.
Here.
Alderman Kramer.
Here.
Alderman Nelson.
Here.
Alderman Emerson. Alderman Lightfoot.
Here. All right, good evening, Mayor Bauer, Board of Aldermen, for taking time for this budget hearing for 2014-2015 fiscal year budget. What we have presented to you as a draft budget, the total budget is less than last year's budget if you deduct the employee raises as well as the professional plan development. Every department head has worked diligently with me. In the absence of finance director, we have consulted the services of Ben Hart, and he is also with us today. If there is any question that his staff is unable to answer, he may be assisting us. But the overall process went very smooth. Every department head worked with me to identifying the areas where we could have reduced the budget to the point and to the extent where we could provide employee raises. This year budget include a 4% increase across the board, except those who are participating in the professional development plan. The budget is hold the line budget. There are very few new programs included in this draft budget presented to you. Therefore, I asked the departments to provide a very brief orientation of their budget. The advice that I have given to them was based on 1-3-1 concept. One is talk about very important item that they have completed last year. Talk about 3 major items that is included in this year's budget, and also highlight 1 item that they would like to include or achieve in the upcoming or future budgets. So I do anticipate very brief hearing, and then they will be ready to answer any question or concern that you may have. We will continue the hearing after the conclusion of the regular meeting, and we'll bring forward the final budget for adoption in October 7th meeting. As you can see on the agenda, we have also provided you an amended agenda where corrections were made. So the first person is going to give you a presentation is Doug Jonesy regarding the EMS department.
Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. The highlights of last year had a hard time selecting just one. We completed the purchase of the second new ambulance, as well as completing the P25 upgrades to our radio systems. All of those are working very, very well. We have begun making our cadre of instructors in the education part of our operation more robust, and the fee increase and collections are well underway. In the present proposed budget, we are looking to continue to strengthen our education roster, catch up on some capital improvements, both for the station and operationally, which had to be held for a non-ambulance year. We are not buying an ambulance this year. and then also to continue to strengthen our part-time roster. The future item that we're eagerly looking forward to is to develop the professional development program along the same lines as the one brought by the police department. And overall, our requested general fund budget shows to be about just over 5% less than last year's. This is owing pretty much entirely to the turnover that we've had, reducing the overall payroll level. So, if you have any questions.
Any questions of Mr. Jonesy? Start with Mr. Ertz.
Thank you, and thank you, Jonas. I noticed, when I look at revenue, is your budget, as far as revenue coming in, ambulance fees, is there any other revenue that you receive besides ambulance fees and your EMS classes?
Oh, there are the fees, the EMS classes, and then just a small bit for the fees that we collect for copying medical records.
Sure. Okay, but nothing that, I know,
Nothing substantial.
Over the last, and this, they give us back, I'm sure, hopefully you're looking at the same thing. I had 2010 to 11, 11, 12, and 12 and 13. Your revenue in was less than 900,000, less than 900,000. The last full year that we have record of, it's about 910,000. And this year, you're budgeting like last year, about 950,000. Are the Medicare bills being paid better? Is that why that's increased up, or?
Oh, well, we had the rate increase,
Okay, yeah, rate increase, that's true.
and also we are more diligently pursuing what otherwise in the past would have been written off.
We used to have big spikes up and down, and that was always troubling for us, because all of a sudden they would send us 600,000 and you wouldn't hear from them for a long time. That's leveled out now where you're getting consistent.
It seems to be.
Okay. That said, then, you're not budgeting in the black, but you're a lot closer than you've been in many years.
We're working on it.
Before, I'm figuring about 950,000 in and about $1,030,000 out. Of course, you're not buying an ambulance this year, and that's probably what, $50,000 or better. So that's some of that, maybe.
Yeah, they're a bit more than that.
Okay, so we still have to go a little bit farther before it becomes
But
self-sufficient.
the ambulances do not come out of the general fund, however.
Oh, okay,
So-
sorry. So these are apples to apples numbers all the way across the line about how you're running. So-
Yes, sir.
Well, great. Those are my only comments, and like I said, it looks like it's a very good improvement. Appreciate that, and see how it
Thank you,
goes.
sir.
Other questions? You're way under schedule, Doug.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, up next is Public Works.
You want to take a little break since we're ahead of schedule? Welcome, Andy.
Hello, Mayor, Board of Aldermen. I'm going to go over 5 items today. First one is the general fund, second is sewer fund, then we'll hit the transportation sales tax fund, capital sales tax fund, and then the capital improvement fund. I'll go over each and stop, and if you have any specific questions over that fund before proceeding to the next. So for the first one, the general fund, some of the big items that we completed last year, one is the implementation of the cleanup coupons and allowing those for the use of brush as well. And then this one I have to mention is the completion of the, or almost 100% completed of the Google Fiber installation, of tracking down all those contractors and keeping track of those. Some of the changes this year, we had a reduction in vehicle expenses. A lot of that is attributable to higher fuel efficiency vehicles that we're purchasing. Items in the current budget, we have to make sure that we get the Phase 2 permit, that stormwater permit. We applied for a permit. However, Missouri Department of Natural Resources has not received the 5-year permit, therefore they can't issue us a permit. So hopefully there's no long drawn-out process with getting that permit renewed. However, we've sent in all our information, but that doesn't mean there isn't any significant changes coming. Have to continue the oversight of Google and other utility construction. There's a lot of updates to the gas system, fiber systems throughout the city, and keeping track of those contractors, who's cut what, who's made the mess where, takes some time and effort, and quite a bit of that as well. And then some GPS upgrades for our vehicles. Our passive system that we utilize right now for our vehicles is not going to be supported in the future, so we will be upgrading to an active system. The good news is it's not much more expensive than our passive system, and it gives us better information. So that will be helpful as well. And then some future items that we really need to keep an eye on in the general fund really relates to vehicle expenses. And within that is the fueling infrastructure with our fuel tanks. Currently, we have our own fuel tanks for gasoline and diesel. This current year was a high year for expenses for repairs that were necessary for those items. Need to continue to keep an eye on that, make sure that this is that once every 5th or 6th year where we have quite a few expenses, and then several years following that with very little expenses. Otherwise, it might make more sense to just purchase it from one of the many vendors within the city on a statewide negotiated contract. So right now, it's still advantageous for us to do that. We've looked into that with Wright Express fueling. We still are able to save about $40,000 a year by utilizing our own fuel tanks. So that's just something that we need to keep track of. Those are the bigger items for the general fund. Here to answer any other questions on the general fund before moving on.
Go ahead.
Thank you. My understanding is, of course, Google is probably almost out of town now, but still, I think, in a few pockets around I've seen.
Yes, that's correct.
We talked to the gas company, and they're going to be here till 2017. So that's not going to go away very soon. And you're spending a lot of time chasing around these companies that have multiple crews out there trying to keep our roads in good shape and making sure repairs are done. Are we recouping enough, and I can't believe I'm saying this in my industry, are we recouping enough off our degradation fees, obviously, to pay for a lot of this oversight that a lot of these people are I mean,
Yes.
it's my city hat here. So.
Right. With that, every time they call in a one call, that costs us $1.30.
I know that
familiar
very
with that
well.
one as well.
You bet.
But yes, we are recouping enough to fund that position for the right-of-way inspector to keep track of those. So currently, we are recouping enough fees at that $75, and then
I would think they'd be doing overtime right now. I mean, with all
he's been very busy. He has been doing overtime
you
this
know,
year.
and I just wanted to make sure that we weren't taking a loss on anything like that. In fact, we should be coming out well on this. If
Yeah, we were coming out fine on that.
gas company was coming down my street, I mean, it's sidewalks, it's curbs, and it's a hodgepodge of things, and every street's different. It's not like there's a consistent pattern that you could send somebody out and look for. You're going to have somebody very experienced to go out there and know what's going on.
That is correct.
So-
Not only experienced, but vigilant to make sure they track down who's cutting what and make sure you get it repaired correctly.
So so you're not suggesting any increase in any fees
Not at
charged
this
by
time.
Public Works at this time?
No, not at this
And
time.
you can remain a profitable department that way?
I wouldn't say we're profitable. but
Well, let's just say not profitable, but
yes.
not
We're not bleeding money.
not a drag. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to be a profitable business in that sense. Any other questions of Mr. Knoll on this particular item?
Okay.
This is the
General fund.
general fund.
Okay.
Okay.
Moving on to the sewer fund. Changes in this, we have some reduction in the sewer mitigation expenses. That's generally due to we have fewer and fewer participants each and every year. There's a limited number of homes within the city, and we're just getting on that downward slope where there's fewer and fewer people who are interested in participating in that program. And then also we're having an increase in capital improvements to make sure we can keep up with problems that we find in the sewer system. One of the big items completed this year was that White Oak West Line A project, just recently. It's probably about 95% complete right now, but with the major sewer construction along 83rd Street, which has helped significantly. They have not had a surcharging event in that area this year, even in our heavy rain, so that's helped significantly. Items of note for this coming year, we need to continue monitor our expense structure from the Little Blue Valley Sewer District. That is expected to go up on a per amount of around 6% per year. However, our contribution to the overall has been declining, so we've kind of been hitting in the middle where we have a zero net increase. We have to continue to keep an eye on that, and if our percentage contribution changes much, we could see a fairly increase in that. So we have to continue on the downward slope while their rate structure continues on the upward slope to make sure we are flat. So that's going to be very important that we monitor those. We need to finish implementation of tying our maintenance records to our GIS database because it makes it easier for us to identify problem areas and areas that need more attention. And then increase in capital improvements funding for our backup mitigation. That's where we find sewer pipes through televising that are compromised structurally and compromise our ability to convey the flow through the pipe, which then could increase our potential for a backup. We have to continue to focus to make sure we get those fixed as quickly as we can, while we're also focusing on inflow and infiltration reduction. That helps keep our rate structure flat. The future item really is just around that rate structure. We need to continue that capital improvement investment so that we can continue to reduce our inflow and infiltration so that our rate structure doesn't have to increase. That's going to be important to track year after year, all the time. You're going to have to be diligent to make sure we're doing what we can to remove inflow and infiltration. I think that's about the big items for the sewer fund. Do you have any questions with the sewer fund?
Andy, my understanding is, sitting on the Little Blue Valley Sewer District Board, my understanding is we are going to increase 5%, I think, is this coming year is what's forecasted, so.
Right. I think that's the increase from the Little Blue Valley.
Right.
Correct. Their overall billing structure is going up 5 to 6% a year, but thankfully to our decrease in the contribution percentage, we don't have an increase in fees, or not a substantial increase.
Good. Okay.
Is Little Blue the bigger one that
Yeah.
we sell to?
Yeah.
They're getting awfully close, but yes, it is the bigger of the two expenses. Moving on, the Transportation Sales Tax Fund. One of the biggest changes, well, let me start with the big item, the reauthorization for an additional 10 years. That's absolutely essential to our services that we provide to the residents. Some of the changes this year, to make sure that we can address the 83rd Street Bridge, we have to reduce the amount of money that we're going to spend on asphalt overlay and lightweight aggregate seal coat and some other concrete. So what we're planning on addressing 83rd Street Bridge is $250,000 this coming fiscal year, and then the remaining about $350,000 from the next fiscal year. It's going to take some time once we authorize a designer to actually complete all of the environmental permits that are going to be required for that project. I seriously doubt we'll get much construction done in the next fiscal year. Hopefully we'll have it bid and maybe underway, but I don't think we'll incur a bulk of the expenses in the coming fiscal year. So it'll be that fiscal year 15-16, you'll actually have the bulk of the expense for the 83rd Street Bridge. So that in effect, we'll break that large project over two separate fiscal years. And with that is also the KCATA bus funding. There's $75,000 set aside for the bus funding. What they do is they provide us a level of service that equals $75,000. That's what we contribute to them. So as we go forward, I don't see their costs going down. Therefore, the level of service is going to have to go down in some manner to keep that equal to $75,000. So that's something just to keep in mind. Future item, don't see a lot of revenue growth in the transportation sales tax, so that's going to have a limiting factor on what we can do with pavement maintenance in the future. Hopefully we get past the 83rd Street Bridge, or maybe find alternative funding for 83rd Street Bridge. But that's something that's going to have to be, keep an eye on that, because that'll mean less and less square yards of asphalt, less lineal feet of curb replaced each and every year. So, any questions of transportation?
Mr. Van Buskirk?
Under the Kansas City Area Transit Authority contribution. I'm curious about the increase for the budget 13, 14, or, well, do we actually have?
Sorry about that. Yes, I believe that increase was at one,
Is it the same as 13, 14?
Yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I'm looking at two different pages here. Look, a little bit confusing. Did we not reduce that amount? I was looking back at 2012, 2013, it was at 44,930, it looks like.
I believe what happened on the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority, it had a decrease in 2012, 2013. And then what they did is we reorganized the contract agreement so that they can give us as much service as possible for $75,000 instead of guaranteeing one or two buses. I think it was maximizing the services available to the residents for $75,000, where previously it was set at one bus or two buses.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure those figures were correct.
Also, if you recall, there was a time when the contract was renewed, like in November 1st, and we extended that to the December 31st, so that it skewed the number in one particular year, but then it will be leveled off.
I do recollect that. Thank you.
Mr. Ertz?
Getting back to the 83rd Street Bridge, it seems, no matter how many years you stretch that out over, between the design, getting the permits, the engineering, and the construction, we're basically going to lose a whole year's worth of overlays building that.
Correct. Yeah, unless we find some sort of alternative funding for it.
Okay. And that's, yeah, this town doesn't seem like we can go a year without having overlays. No matter how you slice that, we would like to see more going into that than less. So do we have bonding authority already to do anything like that, or is that too small of an amount as itself?
Yeah, as itself, I think it's too small of an amount.
You'd spend more
Yes,
chasing the bond.
the bond fees would be so high, it would be a equivalent, very high.
It's a problem
interest
we
rate.
can tackle another day, hopefully.
Yeah, I think something that maybe, right now we have a mechanism assigned, but there may be a much better way where we can all get together and discuss some other options that may be available to us.
Other than making two cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, other than making two cul-de-sacs, correct.
Thank you.
Other questions of Andy?
Okay.
Sir?
Capital sales tax. The biggest item for this one is, again, is we renewed this tax for another 10 years thanks to the voters. This is driven by the needs of the departments in the cities. Items of note for this year is an $800,000 remodel for downstairs. Last year, we had $400,000 for HVAC, but as you go through it, and we identified some sewer pipe issues, it's like we really need to pull back on this for 1 year so we can get additional funding so we can tackle all the items at once. Because we're going to have to find alternative offices that are outside of that space for the PD during that construction. It doesn't make any sense to just do the HVAC, bring them back, and then still have carpet issues, plumbing issues, carpet issues that need to be done, all those items. So let's get it all done at once, and that's where the $800,000 is from. This also includes street light replacements / additions. What we're trying to do there is we're going to go through, add some lights, but also at the same time replace some of the existing leased lights that we lease from KCP&L for a yearly set fee. We want to purchase those lights or purchase a replacement light where we only pay for the electricity that we consume at that light. That will significantly lower our recurring expenses in the general fund so that we can provide more lights. Because we could provide a lot more street lights if we owned them and maintained them and just paid for the energy consumption than we can by leasing the lights directly from KCP&L. We believe we can be more efficient and effective at that than KCP&L can. So that's the next process to try to get more street lights throughout the city. And then the items of note is maintenance of the fleet replacement cycle. We really need to make sure we're planning for a certain number of patrol cars, police cars, public works vehicles, all of the vehicles of the fleet, making sure they get replaced. So we need to make sure we adhere to that cycle. Pushing it 1 year could really load you up or start on the next particular year. So we're adhering to that cycle, and I think that's important. Future items, there's going to be more building maintenance renovations that are going to be needed as the building continues to age. as we make some renovations, then it's going to turn your eye to something else that's like, wow, now that we did that, all of a sudden that looks really bad, and maybe we ought to do something with that. And not to mention energy efficiency of the building. It's not very energy efficient, could really use a lot of upgrades. The HVAC downstairs will make a big change to that, but we also need to look at the windows throughout the building as well. So those will be coming up in the future. Any questions about the capital sales tax?
Mr. Van Buskirk.
What do you anticipate the net gain in viable or usable street lights to be?
Right now, it's really going to depend on if there's any, I'm a little leery on if there's any hidden expenses from KCP&L when we take down a street light, how much they're going to charge us for removal of that street light. Has it been completely depreciated over the last 15 or 20 years? So are we going to have to pay them $1,000 to take that light down, or is it going to be free because it's exceeded its life expectancy? And anything we put up is really dependent on what we want to do, how much level of service we want to provide. I think it could be a 30% decrease in the recurring amount that we pay for streetlights, which is over $200,000 a year. So if you reduce that by $200,000 and you start adding back, that's a lot. That's a significant portion of streetlights that we could add to the system. And really what I'm trying to do is make sure that we don't increase that line item, that we do something to decrease the revenue, decrease the expenses before we add more lights that add those expenses back.
Are we going to have a net gain in streetlights from this?
Yes, ultimately a net gain in streetlights. That's the idea. So if we can stop paying where we just pay for 6 cents per kilowatt hour or 7 cents per kilowatt hour for the energy consumed, and if we spend the money up front for very high efficiency streetlights, that's that many more streetlights that we can afford to put into service. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Green, Mr. Josh Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andy, I just want to say that I'm glad to hear you talk about the streetlights issue because, as you know, I've talked with you multiple times on this, and I'm just really glad to hear the whole. It's the way that this whole thing's set up. It's going to be a long-term process.
Yes.
Because you're buying essentially buying those streetlights back and putting our own up, but in the long run, it's going to save the city so much money, and I'm just glad to hear that it's kind of coming to fruition as a priority here. Thanks.
Mr. Jason Green.
Yeah, I think I'd kind of echo what Mr. Van Buskirk and Mr. Green mentioned. Yeah, this is something that we've all discussed for a little bit. I just want to clarify something. So before we know how many new streetlights we're going to add, it's going to be the replacement process. It's going to kind of take hold first, and then what the savings from that is what will determine how many additional streetlights we will purchase, correct?
Correct. It'll depend on the capital price for
Yeah.
each fixture and then how much recurring cost.
And we won't know that number for quite some time just because of the
Well, we'll
process.
have to actually get into it,
Yeah, yeah.
identify the areas we want to start in.
Yeah.
How old are those lights? Because I don't have that information from
Yeah, sure.
KCP&L, and I won't know until I ask them to take it down, how much it's going to cost.
Yeah.
And then I want to put something back up, make sure there's no, sometimes you read through all the tariff information and there may be something missing or they interpret it differently than I do, and you're just not going to know until you ask them to do it and make sure what those is. So it's kind of a trial process to get started. Hopefully next year we'll find out how many that can be or what the savings is per light. So
Yeah.
I can tell you it's substantial if you're only paying 7 cents per kilowatt hour
Yeah.
for the consumption.
Well, thanks for the information, Andy.
You're welcome.
Mr. Van Buskirk.
So when you approach Kansas City Power and Light, you're going to say, we're going to do you a huge favor here, right? It's the way, and they're going to go, well, great.
No. They probably won't see it that way.
We hope they interpret it that way. The sign here at City Hall, we had budgeted $10,000 from last year for that. Nothing in the budget this year, but we still don't have a sign. What's,
Trying to finish that up here in the last months of this budget year.
now, did we recoup some of that?
I don't know. I don't know if the person had, it's, a lot of the times the people don't have insurance. So when we have those issues, a lot of times they don't have insurance. So I'm not sure what we've recouped at this time frame. I don't think we have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Green, Mr. Josh Green.
Thank you. And if you don't have these exact numbers on you, just if you can give them back to me sometime, because I remember I've discussed this with you before, and I was just curious, because you said it's 7 cents per kilowatt hour, right?
It's in that general range, yes.
And then how much is it we're paying, it's per monthly fee that we're paying for each streetlight right now?
I believe it's like, depends on the particular infrastructure, but it's anywhere from $250 to $400 per year per light.
Okay. And is that 250 including electricity or?
Yes, it's
Okay.
all inclusive maintenance,
That's
everything.
what I was wondering, because I remember I got these numbers from you once before, but I don't have them anywhere on me right now, and I just want to write them down. Thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Knoll? Thank
Okay.
you.
Last item is the capital improvement fund. The big item completed this year is the radio system is complete, so that we're currently utilizing the new digital system. PD is, Public Works, I believe everybody's utilizing that system currently. Items of note for this one, this is where we pay for capital construction projects that also have a grant matching amount. We basically transfer everything into the capital improvement fund, pay for it there so that we can track it and cross over multiple budget and fiscal years in an appropriate manner. This includes, the downtown streetscape, 350 bike ped trail, Blue Ridge Boulevard bike lanes, the 59th Street sidewalks, and the Raytown Road intersection. Those are the items that are anticipated out of that fund. And really, the long-term item for the CIP is funding. Right now, the main source of funding to this project is a repayment of the Ditzler CID loan. That's really what our main source of funding for this project is. Other than that, it's transfers from other funds within the city budget. Here to answer any questions you may have.
Question, Mr. Knoll. Mr. Van Buskirk.
Now, you mentioned the Blue Ridge Bike Trail, but in actuality, that's an overlay project, right?
Yes, it is.
It includes
updates.
markings for
Bike
bike
lanes,
trail,
yes.
is that correct?
And it also has some improvements to traffic signals as well.
Have you considered, I know this is budget hearings, but have you considered what we talked about the bike markings being in the driving lane? For instance, over on Chrysler and Independence where they do that, they kept the turn lanes in the middle. They put the bike emblems in the driving lane. Have we considered something like that? I feel like we're creating somewhat of a traffic hazard doing what we're planning on doing there. But
I don't think we're creating a traffic hazard. If you look through there's a couple of areas where that turn lane is utilized, and we're going to study those, and we'll keep it at that particular location where that center turn lane is needed. But you have to provide at least a 14-foot lane if you're going to do a shared use lane. And we're 4 feet too narrow along that section of roadway to do that. So,
thanks for going ahead and answering that.
Not a problem.
I appreciate
but
it.
definitely we'll look into it. So.
The amount for the 350 pedestrian and bike trail that we're, our portion of it is something a little under, see, the reimbursement's $433,000, right?
Correct.
So we're paying $516,000 or a little over for that project?
I think you're looking at the downtown streetscape one. The 350 bike ped trail, we expect the total
Okay.
cost around $700. So it's still $370,000, yes.
Okay,
No small sum.
300,000, okay. I was looking at the other one.
270.
So the combination of those two is up around in excess of 800,000, not including the grant money.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Green? Mr. Jason Green?
Thank you. I just had a quick question on the downtown streetscape. Is there, since it was brought forth on this, is there any time, like, at least narrowed down to when this will start?
We're actually going to bring forward a study session at the next board meeting where we're going to discuss these projects for time frame and where we're at, what we're trying to accomplish at this current time. But we were really hoping to tie two of them together, and one got delayed, and it's pushing both of them back. It's probably not hindsight 2020 may not have been the best decision to try to bid both of those at the same time because it just slowed both of them down.
Okay, thank you.
All right, other questions? Mr. Ertz?
Just to note, it looks like the Ditzler CID loan is being repaid ahead of schedule. It looked like it was 80,000 brought in.
That's not something I can really answer and
Depends
feel
on how many
comfortable
years,
with.
depends on what the schedule was.
Yeah, but I believe it is.
But it's being healthy. Thank you.
All right, very good. Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Knoll.
All right, the next is Development and Public Affairs.
Welcome, Mr. Benson.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Board of Aldermen. As Mahesh described earlier, I'd like to start out for our department with the 131 concept as far as our one accomplishment or major accomplishment for the past year related to community outreach, which involved implementation of the Engage Raytown online communication, as well as distribution of 2 newsletters or publication of 2 newsletters in the past year. That's an ongoing effort, obviously, and we'll continue that moving forward, both of those aspects. The 3 things in this year's budget, one is the continuation of we have budgeted for 2 new city newsletters in the coming budget year. One change that we've started to with the second newsletter that in this previous year was advertising. We anticipate advertising costs will offset some of our costs to the publishing or producing the newsletter moving forward. We're estimating those revenues to be half or 50% of our costs. The other program for the coming year is our NSP3 program, and I'll touch on that a little bit more here in a moment. The grant funds for that grant have been expended. We're currently operating. That program is still ongoing using program income. That's in effect a revolving fund as how it goes into purchase and rehab or construction of new homes, and then when those are sold, that program income comes back into the program. In the coming budget year, that program will close out. We estimate that to be sometime next spring, March or April timeframe. In the past year, we've sold 2 homes of the NSP3 homes in Raytown, rehabbed 1 additional home on 53rd Street, and they are getting ready to start construction on 2 more homes in Raytown here in the next month or 2. And the third item in the budget will be, and I mentioned this in, I believe it was the previous board meeting, is we will be going out for RFPs or requests for services for veterinary services for our animal control, as well as our nuisance abatement contract. In our in our budget for professional services, we've estimated based on our previous year expenses for veterinary services, we anticipate or we've proposed an increase of $5,000 to the veterinary services budget based on our current year expenditures. And then moving forward beyond into the future years, a neighborhood revitalization program, which you as a board discussed as one of your priorities at your goal-setting session. We've got a number of aspects in the works on that that we'll be working towards in the coming year as well as beyond. That involves a homeowner assistance program, further neighborhood outreach to residents, taking advantage of the state's Abandoned Housing Act, as well as neighborhood preservation tax credits to generate or provide additional funding to the city's funds. Jumping ahead here to the capital sales tax budget for the Development and Public Affairs Department. Our total projected requested is substantially down from the current budget year. We are proposing in the next budget year, to purchase or budgeting $7,500 for computer tablet purchases, as well as printers for code enforcement vehicles. And then P25 compliant radios, which is a carryover from our current budget year. We're not going to be expending those funds this year, so we're moving those forward into the next budget year. And then moving further into the budget on the NSP tab, as I mentioned earlier, that program will be wrapping that up in the coming budget year. We've projected a revenue amount of $400,000 with expenditures of $400,000 in that program, with the program income for that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Mr. Benson? Mr. Mock?
Yeah, Mr. Benson, how long has that house been for sale on 53rd Street?
Which house at 53rd and Laurel?
Yes.
That's been for sale, I believe, 2 to 3 years. That one they built; those are the first two houses. One has sold, and the other one is still available.
Is that the one on the corner? Or?
I believe it's the second one in from the corner that's for sale.
Okay, thanks, John.
Other questions, Mr. Benson? Mr. Green?
I just want to make a quick comment. Looking over some of the stuff that was written on here, and I just wanted to re-stress that I know it seems like something small, but the fact that we're getting like actual like City of Raytown, uniforms for code officers, I think is actually something that's quite nice. Kind of gives a sense of professionalism and everything to the position. So I just wanted to say that you and your crew, great idea. Simple stuff like that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Van Buskirk?
I do have one question. You're talking about the $400,000 revenue and $400,000 to be spent. That's all from the grant?
Correct. It's the program income. So as a house is remodeled or constructed and it's sold, that the money coming back in from the sale goes back in as program income.
Is that still just our portion or the entire,
That is
all of the cities together?
That's all cities together.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Ertz?
You said there's 2 more houses. Do you know where they're at?
53rd and, I apologize, I'm going to say 53rd and Willow, I believe, and I apologize, I don't have the specific address. It was a property that probably about 10 years ago, a house caught on fire and burned down. It's been a vacant lot since. They were able to acquire it, and as well as the house next door, that they rehabbed the house next door, and there were lots that were about 250 feet deep. One was a corner lot. They split off the back end of the lots to create a third lot, and so they'll be building on the vacant lot plus the new lot that was created.
These are available through all the wards now, correct?
Pardon me?
These will be in the future available to all the wards?
The program income, yes.
Expanded out.
That's a good, yes, thank you for bringing that up. The grant was restricted to a specific area or geographic area of Raytown north of 59th Street, generally the north end of Raytown. The program income, we can go anywhere within the city of Raytown now with those funds.
Good, thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Benson.
Thank you.
Next is Police Department.
Welcome, Chief.
First thing I'd like to talk to you about is the radio project. It's been going on for years. The concept for the P25 radio upgrade project actually began several years ago. At that time, it was estimated that the new radio system for Raytown would cost about $8 million and would involve substantial infrastructure replacement. However, it was also known at some point federal authority would mandate P25 compliance throughout the country. As a result, Kansas City Metro Area Regional Radio System, MARS, was formed and began a $30 million project in January 2010 to focus switching analog-based communication to digital P25 standards. Kansas City formed the foundation of Mars system, allowing outside agencies to upgrade their radio system and to be able to operate on the Kansas City system at a subscriber fee basis. And the FY 2012, the Raytown Police Department began to upgrade its subscriber equipment to become P25 compliant and capable at a cost of $191,000 through funding from the capital sales tax. Plans were made for funding of the construction of a radio tower and further infrastructure costs. In late summer of 2012, the city of Raytown was approached by Verizon Wireless to allow construction of a 180-foot self-supporting radio tower on a land just north of the police department. The tower was constructed and signed over to the city at no cost and saved over $200,000. In September of 2012, Motorola introduced a proposal for the remaining infrastructure and radio console and installation of $1,224,000. The Raytown Board of Aldermen authorized $458,000 from capital sales tax, $615,000 from public safety sales tax, and $150,000 for the general fund to fund the project. For the next year and a half, the equipment was constructed, installed, and tested. On 8/19/14, August this year, the city went live on a new system. The resulting radio transmissions are incredibly clear, and the city now has interoperability with other agencies within the Mars region. And why that's important, an event in Grand Valley this weekend, we had some officers out there. The banditos, the allied motorcycle gangs were out there, and they were able to communicate Highway Patrol, Jackson County, us, several agencies were able to talk on the equipment they had. By taking advantage of the partnership with Verizon, the city of Kansas City and Mars Regional, the police department, and the city of Raytown, we're able to upgrade the city's old analog radio system to a digital P25 compliance and capable system with a cost savings of roughly from the original estimate of $6.5 million. So, 3 plans that are under development. We're working with the judge on this first one is mobile ticketing. This would entail outfitting all cars with hardware necessary in the courts and utilization of a docket management software offered by Regis, which is the Regional Justice Information System, where it gets all the information, criminal records, driver's licenses, and able to, scan information if you have multiple tickets being written. It's instantaneous. You don't cut out the handwriting, cut out mistakes, that kind of thing. So we're looking at that in the future. Body-worn cameras. We're looking at this project, purchase some cameras in this year's budget, and to expand that in the future. That would be for all uniformed patrol officers. Mobile fingerprint identification. We've applied for a local law enforcement block grant, and if granted in January, we plan on buying 5 mobile fingerprint identification units with the hope of expanding in the future. And what that will do for us when people don't have identification in the field, et cetera, we'll be able potentially to instantly identify them. A fourth thing, just to add, we're looking forward to the continued work. I know Andy's been working real hard on this and give him a hard time about the HVAC and plumbing and, old building issues, but there's a lot of money budgeted for that, and so big project. Lastly, and we talked about this at the board retreat, is the professional development plan. The police department in 2015 budget submission includes the implementation of a structured compensation plan. This plan, referred to as the Professional Development Plan, PDP, is a merit-based plan designed to encourage employees to seek increasing levels of responsibility within the department and to seek opportunities for positive community interactions above the required minimum. The plan consists of employees seeking PDP points as well as tenure in order to advance within the department pay range. This plan outlines training and performance expectations, thereby increasing both the performance and initiative of department employees. The police department believes this approach to employee advancement is much more responsible than simply relying on 10 years as a yardstick for experience. Many of our employees seek additional levels of training, certifications, and responsibility, which is not recognized simply by quantifying tenure. We feel this plan will provide many benefits to the department, the city as a whole, and encourage our employees to gain formal education and training, which in turn creates experienced employees who are invested in the success of the department and the city. This plan requires significantly less fiscal impact to maintain in the coming years than past plans. Similar plans are in place in other metro police departments, and city administrations have been pleased with the results of that yearly expense. The police department believes this professional development plan will improve recruitment, enhance retention, and facilitate the development of professionals within the department, thereby continuing the high level of performance the city of Raytown deserves. That's all I have for my opening or remarks. If you have any questions about anything.
Questions of the chief? Mr. Van Buskirk.
I noticed there are a number of items, additions to the 2014-2015 budget that were not there last year, that appear to be for training. And my assumption is that that's related to the professional development plan. Is that, am I correct in assuming that?
Yes, and it's more than that. I mean, there's some years, like take CVSA recertification, I know that's on there. Some years, I'm going to say we have 4 examiners, and the recertification is every 2 or 3 years. I think it's 3 years now. So, you try to divide it up, and so you might not have it in 1 year, but you do have to be recertified, to be qualified under the, the professional development plan. You do have to train. I know one of the big thing that's on there is the fingerprint identification and getting people qualified to do that. That is a big expense. But what we have to do now, we do have 2 people that do fingerprints, but there are certain levels of how you're qualified. And so you might go to one training in this year's budget, but to reach that other level, you might have to go next year to the second level. And what that does for us is we're able to, in-house, identify fingerprints if we have a burglary scene. We don't do everything CSI does yet, but we've come a long way, and we can identify fingerprints. We have somebody here to do it. We don't have to send it out, ship it out. We don't have that cost. So eventually, we believe there will be some cost savings with some of the stuff we're doing, but we have to train other people to bring them in-house. That's some of it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Chief.
Other questions of the chief? Mr. Jason Green.
I had a question about this. You mentioned those body form cameras. It's just like a tiny little camera. Is that what you're referring to? That just hooks up on like the collar maybe or something like that? I guess. Kind of maybe explain that to me. I'm just curious.
The cameras themselves, the physical.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Metro Chiefs and Sheriffs, and I've seen Lenexa Police Department came and did a demonstration on one. I think there's a variety, and I'm not up on it exactly. Yeah. I mean, some of them they're actually bigger than what you're talking about. But do you have anything, Doug, on that?
Yes, we're actually looking at a Digital Ally product. We currently utilize the Digital Ally in-car cameras, and it would integrate with that same system and would be able to utilize the same database. I believe it's called First View. It's worn basically centered in the chest right here, and it's activated by the officer. And you have audio and video of the encounter from basically kind of like the officer's view of what occurred.
And the reason I mentioned, I just think that, I mean, obviously this is down the road, but I think that'd be great. I think you could potentially avoid a situation like we're seeing across the state, where information's not getting out there on what took place. And I think, God forbid something like that would happen here, but I think that would help remove the city from some liability, obviously, from the police department and the city if such was enforced.
When we went to the in-car digital cameras, the amount of complaints we were able to actually defer because we could see exactly what occurred. Mm-hmm. The he said, she said is now documented electronically, and we keep those for about a year. It's the
Yeah.
same concept with the body-worn cameras, except for it goes to different places, and you're not restricted to just the car. If the officer gets in a foot chase or there's an event that occurs in a building, it's recorded.
Yeah.
And we have that protection for us and for the citizens.
Sure, that's the
If we
thing.
have an officer that's not behaving properly, we can address that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Continue, Chief.
So, just to add a little bit, we try to let other people test all this stuff out first. Trial and error. I know the judge is probably pretty anxious to have the electronic ticketing. We've talked about it a little bit, and we are too. I believe Raymore is a city that had put it in, and it just didn't work for them, and so they're back to the drawing board. I don't know where they are now, but I mean, that's, the war stories that you hope everybody else does, and then you do it right, but,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah. Well-
And we don't spend the money. But.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for the information. Appreciate it.
Mr. Josh Green.
I was just curious, as we were talking about cameras, if you guys use those cameras for training purposes at all.
Yes, we do.
Okay. I was just, and especially with the body-worn camera, that was another advantage I was thinking of, essentially, because,
We've utilized in the past some helmet-worn cameras for the SWAT team. And this particular system integrates with our current in-car system. So you've got one database to be able to manage all the video and audio. And it's searchable, and you can archive different recordings if necessary and keep it, and you can burn to a disk, you need to hold it for court later on, things like that.
a lot more efficient. Yep. Thanks.
Mr. Ertz.
Very proud of our police department. I hope this new incentive or education plan works as far as, retaining our officers. It sounds like a very good plan. I do notice that, our police pension seems to be stabler now than before, so I do notice our police department, when you get down to the employee benefit line on here, it's a very large portion that perhaps the officers don't realize, but over 50% more than what they're making is going into the benefit plan for the police department here. So, and I'm glad that we can do that. I'm glad, hopefully, we'll retain the good officers that we have. Thank you.
Mr. Van Buskirk.
One more quick question, Chief. In regards to the professional development plan, would that enable, say, an officer that works on the street, is good at that, wants to stay there, wants to do that, enable them to grow, have monetary growth in their salary and still be able to stay in that position, or if they pursue those, the training that's available and the growth that's available to them there, would it enable them to do that?
Yes. Ray, do you have anything to add? Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you.
One of the things, too, just, to throw in here about some of the training, Gil Anderson has received an invite to go to Quantico, Virginia, free of cost by the FBI as a hostage negotiator. He's only one of 6 civilians in the country and internationally, and he'll be going there, I believe, this month, September. So, I mean, some of that stuff does pay off. We try and, the FBI is saying, hey, come on out. We got a good guy here, and he'll get, better training, and it's free.
Anything else? Chief, I too want to thank you and particularly Officer Hudspeth for hard work that went into this development of this new plan. I think it's come along. We've talked about that for a long time, and I'm glad that Randy, that you came up with a plan that works and works so well with Mahesh and making it come to fruition. So I appreciate that. And as Mr. Ertz pointed out, a lot of hard work has gone on this year and past with the police pension fund. And I think we're all seeing the benefits of that. Hopefully, still in retention of officers and attraction of new officers and stability within our own financial system. So a lot of hard work by Chief, yourself and your officers, and it's appreciated. Okay, anything else? Thank you. And I think, Mahesh, with that, unless you've got something else, we're going to take a 10-minute break to reload the camera, and then we'll reassume our positions here and start the meeting at about 7:10. Okay, we are almost all back in our places with our bright smiling faces. We are continuing the tentative budget hearing tonight. It is almost 7:50. We have concluded the Board of Aldermen meeting, and we will continue with the hearing at this time for the 2014 budget. Mahesh, do you want to tee it up, or do you want to go straight to our esteemed municipal court judge, Tracy Fan?
Good evening, everyone. I guess I'll start with my accomplishments. The past been a little interesting in the municipal court with the employees. We've had lost a full-time employee that had been a long-term employee, lost our new created part-time position person, so we had switched in personnel from one of our full-time employees went to part-time, and then we have since hired 2 new full-time clerks. So we have been busy with the training of the new employees to get them cross-trained on all the aspects of the municipal court. It's always our goal in the municipal court when we hire our court clerks is to have them train and get them their certifications so that they'll have the most utilization of their job by attending the trainings, and that way if anyone's gone in a position, they're able just to move over that position, handle that person's job, which is very important because it is a very, very small department with only 5 employees that work in that department in addition to myself. One of my goals I would like to work towards, and it's been a goal of the last several years, is to try to get the court at some point in the future on the online payment where they can pay the fines that aren't mandatory court appearances online. So I'd like to see the city try to work towards making that happen. There's been talk in the past that it was going to occur, and it didn't occur. So as we're transitioning into a new finance manager, I would hope that that would be something that the city would encourage the new finance manager to look into, getting the online payments for the non-mandatory court appearances. Obviously, there's some fines they would not be allowed to pay online. They would require mandatory court appearances. But for the people that just had a minor ticket, like a speeding ticket or a plate ticket, it'd be something they could pay online. It'd save them the inconvenience of coming up here and paying it in person or showing up at a court date. Because a lot of people don't look on the back of their ticket where it says they can come pay it ahead of time, and then they wait till the court date and they show up to pay it that day. So if there was an online payment, I think that would help streamline the process on court days for the non-mandatory court appearances. Really not much has changed in the budget over the past year. The only thing that's really increased is the benefits for the employees. That's increased as far as because the insurance and all that has gone up. And then the only other area really was in the minor equipment. We put some stuff in the budget to replace 2 receipt printers that are old. In the event they break down, they probably need to be replaced. It's been a long time since that's happened. And some chairs for employees so that they're comfortable at their desk, because everyone has different ways to sit and position themselves. And now that we have 2 new employees, some of the chairs are older and broken down, and they want to replace those. So other than those 2 items, there's not much else that's changed.
Questions of Ms. Fan? Mr. Ertz?
Thank you. Thank you, Judge Fan. I know we're tried for the past 2 years to increase fines for certain crimes in Raytown through the state of Missouri and have not been able to get that done. Obviously, since this money goes back to the general fund and to help support our police department, I'm sure our costs are completely justified in wanting that. I suppose, would you suggest that we continue to try to seek that, or is there another way to encourage people that have maxed out, that our understanding is once they get up to the $500 fine level, the only thing you can do that's punishment after that is to put them in jail, which actually costs us
Right.
more money as a city. So,
That's true. I think it's always important to talk to your people in Jefferson City about that, because they're the only ones that are going to be able to make that happen. I am the legislative chair for the Judges Association, which is a statewide association. I'm now the chair of that committee. And I have talked to the members on the board of the Judges Association about taking a position on that. It's the Judges Association position that we should not take a position on that.
oh, well.
Because they believe it's a conflict of interest. So the only people that are probably going to be able to bring that forward is you all through the legislators.
Okay. It looks like 2 years ago, the amounts that you have taken in increased a little bit, and now they're kind of leveled off again. So,
Well, we did some fine adjustments. Every couple of years, I look at the fines and I adjust them accordingly to what the other metropolitan area fines are. So I try to take a look at that every 2 years or so. So we don't want to be like way above everyone, but we don't want to be way below everyone. We want to probably be consistent with what most courts collect.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tracy.
Next is Park and Recreation.
Mr. Boji, welcome, sir.
Good evening, Mayor Bauer and members of the board. I would like to thank Mahesh and City Clerk for giving me the opportunity to come tonight as opposed to in a couple of weeks. The budget being presented tonight is pending approval by the park, adoption by the park board, scheduled for September 15th. Regarding past accomplishments, we have replaced 2 playgrounds at city parks in the past year, at Carnegie and Minor Smith Park at a cost of $65,000. Upcoming work in the current fiscal year includes renovating the Coleman Park tennis courts at a cost of $210,000. About 50% of that project was completed with leveraged funds, matching city dollars with USTA and Land and Water Conservation funds. Following 2 years of pool management, the city self-managed Super Splash in 2014. The result was slightly increased attendance for the summer, reduced operating costs over FY13. The city hired staff, operated the concession stands, completed staff training, bought uniforms, and took on all the responsibilities that the pool management firm did in past years. We are also in the process of replacing the Carnegie message sign. You'll notice it is gone now on Raytown Road. In the next month or so, we anticipate we'll have a nice 4x7 LED message sign in its place to match the Raytown C2 School District sign. So it should be a good way to convey the city's message, not only parks and recreation, but any activities citywide that may be upcoming. In the future, we're hopeful that we can acquire a new Raytown Park in the north part of the community. We've talked about this for several years. It remains a high priority for the park board to acquire some property up north to develop into a city park. That's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Question, Mr. Boji. Mr. Ernst.
I probably should remind the Super Splash Committee had met earlier, but you kind of alluded to that. It would be great if Katie, who ran Super Splash this year, gave a fantastic presentation about the events and the fun and the excitement that they created there this year. When I read in the Kansas City Star an article where many other area local pools were fighting lowering attendance at their pools, Lee Summit being one, and almost without exception, they were all down. Ours did show a slight increase in attendance, and I think their hard work had a lot to do with that. While if it was a business, yes, it still lost some money, but it did not lose as much money, and I'm sure we'll get final numbers later on that. We'll be excited to see that, and maybe at that time, we could have some type of a presentation to the entire board as to how that went. But all in all, I think that was a good year in the right direction, and I'm glad to see you guys working very hard over there. And I want to compliment you on Dave Turner, and I'm forgetting all their names, but you have an excellent staff on keeping an aging park open, and it was great to see all the work they've done and how they saved the city thousands of dollars by doing pipeline repairs on the spur of the moment and fixing many things that needed to be done this year to keep us having a nice park in our city. So I appreciate that, and thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Boja, I had a chance to tour with you a couple weeks ago, Super Splash, and we went through a number of things that seemed like maintenance was certainly needing to be done.
Yeah.
One, to keep the facility operable in some cases. Other cases, we need to put them back into service. What within this budget have you or the Parks Board or Parks Department planned for a maintenance study to be done on what needs to happen and taking a look at potential capital projects? Have you anticipated that in this budget, sir?
Last year, the Park Board allocated $95,000 toward Super Splash improvements. This current fiscal year budget for FY15 is $50,000 for all capital improvements, and that was to help to balance that pool budget. So the Park Board will be looking at a study of an analysis of the improvements that we need. But specific funds for a study are not in the current budget. We're looking at improvements to pumps, paint, slides, mechanical operations down there, that type of thing.
So you're not going to bring in an independent engineer or entity to study what needs to be done?
At this point, the Park Board has not made a decision on that, but it is certainly under consideration.
The current capital improvement plan that was done, I think that we're operating off is 6 years old now, or is it that looked at potential improvements and what we might do as far as replacement of some of the entities or some of the amenities?
Right.
It's 6 years old?
About 8 years old.
8 years old.
Right. Our capital improvement plan for Super Splash. So to provide a balanced budget, or as close to a balanced budget as we can, we reduce capital projects down at Super Splash significantly.
But doesn't that eventually lead to potentially having to shut down the facility because it's not being maintained properly?
Well, our hope is that we can continue to operate as long as we can.
But if you had $95,000 last year to maintain it and you're proposing reducing that to $50,000,
Right.
it continues to fail and continues to shut down parts of the park, how does it become an attraction then for people?
Well, our plan is to generate revenue of $250,000. At the current budget, we have $347,000 in expenditures. Our plan is to reduce and cut those losses to the city as much as possible. If we want to fund capital improvements, which are sorely needed at Super Splash, then we'll need to go back to the Park Board and say, let's add additional dollars that we don't have those funds.
But back when the park was doing well and the funds were going into a savings account, not going to repairs at the park or anticipating repairs at the park, I mean, we've got ourselves dug into a hole here, and I just don't understand how we can...
Repairs were being made at that time, Mayor Bauer. There was money being funneled into the park. We were spending between $100,000 and $200,000 a year on capital improvements at Super Splash. It's a 50-year-old facility, and we'll continue to put money into it as much as we can. But to balance this budget, we had to cut capital, and that's where we're at.
I don't understand how you reduce your maintenance cost by half. It was amazing to me the amount of equipment that is failing or has already failed, and we're reducing the budget by half already. I don't comprehend that being good business sense, but we've asked our park board to deal with this, if this is the recommendation of the park board. I understand that, but from a business standpoint, I don't understand why we're reducing our maintenance when we have failing equipment, and we're not looking forward to having an entity professionally study it to talk about what might be added to attract more people to increase our attendance even more. I don't understand that. Questions for Mr. Bogie?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Azier.
First of all, I think everybody knows that this summer particularly was the coolest summer that I can ever remember. And historically, I think it's accounted for by the weathermen that, yes, this was a very cool year. Yet your overall attendance went up.
Slightly.
And even though it was slightly, it was a year that was really bad as far as people wanting to go to the park. So I don't think you can really equate how well we did. I mean, usually you don't do better in a bad year. So I think that's a big thing. The other thing is handing out the tickets like you did. I just know that there are a lot of people who had not been at that park, or it's been years since they've been there, that did go this year, that came back and complimented me and said, hey, this is really a cool place. I want to go back again. So I heard, and we're not talking hundreds, but I'll bet I heard a dozen people that say, this is really remarkable. I like it. I think that's a big deal. Also, the fact that somewhere between $100,000 and $120,000 went to salaries that went back into families' pockets in the city of Raytown because you hired people that actually live in Raytown or the Raytown School District to work there. I think that's a big deal. That equates to roughly about $1 million in a 10-year period that you're putting back in families' pockets, especially the children that use that to save for college.
That number is closer to 160,000.
160,000. So in 10-year period is going to be 1.6 million.
Correct.
Which is, I think, is pretty incredible. We don't ever take that. I don't know what the other parks are putting back in the pockets of families, but that's a lot. And I think that makes it very important. Also, you mentioned, the mayor was talking about repairs, but most of the money went to capital improvements. They built 2 other pools. They put in a major system to run that water right, and the bathhouse and slides on top of it. So that was the capital improvement. That probably tripled the size of the park. I don't think there were a lot of improvements that were made during that time. And I think that's different from what the mayor was talking about, because they weren't repairs. And there were a large number of breaks this summer. Those breaks occurred in not the equipment that existed when it was built 50 years ago. Most of them were all in the portions that were built by the park department, not by Mr. Hughes. Is that correct? So, and I think that's what the mayor was alluding to, is that the repairs we needed to make were the repairs that the park department, to the equipment that they added in the last 20 or 25 years. And I like the mayor, I equate what the park department is recommending as a plan to close the facility eventually. I don't see it as a plan that's going to keep it open. Would you agree or disagree with that?
We are in a challenging time with Super Splash. We all are fully aware of that. It's difficult to say what the future of that park will be at the current losses that we're experiencing. In my opinion, the park board will need to make difficult decisions going forward with the park. That's, at this point, that's all I have.
Okay, well, I take your answer as their plan that they're offering is to close the park eventually. That's the way I'm reading it. I didn't say that, but that was the question.
That is a decision that will need to be made by the park board and this board. I can't forecast where that pool will be in the next year. All we're trying to do is keep the park operational at this point.
All right, I can't speak for the rest of this board, but I support keeping that park open
Right.
because of what it does for the people of Raytown.
That's our position too. This is a amenity in the community that we want to maintain and continue to operate. We do our very best with 9 people to maintain that park and keep it functional and operational. Each year, our maintenance costs continue to increase. Our revenue declines. Our sales tax has been flat or declining. It's been a challenge. We're hopeful that we can continue to keep that park going for the benefit of Raytown and the community. That's our goal.
Yeah.
We just don't have the funds to put into capital without increasing the pool budget by a large amount.
I do remember a question I asked, I think, in the spring when you approached the board, is that I'd like to see the numbers on the people that use the other parks. I mean, we spend a lot of money adding playground equipment, the upkeep of those, and compare that to the actual number of people who went to Super Splash. Because even though Super Splash is the pool, the question is how many people use the parks in the wintertime? So it's a fair challenge to answer that question because, again, I don't think the other parks put a lot of money into the pockets of families in Raytown and contribute numbers-wise of the people who actually use it, like Super Splash. So that's just where I'm coming from, and I'm kind of disappointed in what I'm seeing here. So maybe the rest of the board can think on that.
We've reduced the Super Splash operating budget by a large number, over 70,000 this year, to try to keep a balanced budget, to reduce our operating costs. The intent was to keep the park fund stable and balanced for some time.
We've talked about, we've heard for a number of years about how the shelter houses are sold out very early.
Yes.
On our tour, we also talked about whether or not a shelter house or a year-round shelter house might be it might in fact accomplish your goal to have a park on the north side. It seems like if we're having trouble with revenue generation, if you need more money to operate the parks and Super Splash, are we looking into ways to generate more revenue, as in potentially more shelter houses, or to serve that need and find revenue from that?
Yes, we are looking into alternative revenue sources as much as possible.
And when will we see what that is?
Hopeful the governance committee can help us determine that, and we're looking into it at the current point.
Okay, Mr. Ertz.
Thank you. As the Governor's Committee met at the Parks Department and heard a great presentation, I couldn't agree more with Mr. Azier on the value of the park, and now that it's under local control, not only of the great number of residents that were enjoying it there, but of the great experience it was for many of the youth of Raytown to be there. Basically, Super Splash is not your only problem in our Parks Department. It's a fact that you have declining revenues and increasing expenses, whether it be utilities to keep the lights on at the parks or paving or all those expenses. They all add up, and yet revenues have been flat for the Parks Department for many, many years. I guess that's up to everybody to catch that, but I mean, if you go back to the 2010-11, you're at 1.3. Your total revenue was 1.3 million. This year you're budgeting 1.272 million. That entailed is a problem. But your expenses over that same period was 1.4 million. Even if you close Super Splash, you still have a hole in your budget.
Right.
That
That's
is
a
not,
fact.
but that's the only park that you got a P&L sheet on. So while you may run 7 parks, they're all costing you about $200,000 apiece for 1.4 million. So if you're going to start closing things to balance your budget, you better have the next park on the list or the next one after that, because that's not the direction I want us to go. I want us to, if we got to look at a study, that's great, but we also need to find the money for the study. Mayor, I think that's the biggest problem, not the desire for doing it, as to where are we going to find the funds when we're trying to, just keep things alive.
Maintain what we have.
I don't think, so I believe there's no sense in discussing having a shelter put at Super Splash if we can't keep the pool open. That it wouldn't make any sense at all. So I commend you for, trimming the budget everywhere you could, but I think we're going to have to look at some big pictures, and I think as the liaison to the Parks Department or whatever it takes, we're going to have to at least ask the questions, about what it will take to run the amenities and parks that the citizens of Raytown want, and to keep them viable. So and you're right, there's going to be some tough decisions made, whether it's whether it's cutting or increasing, but at some point that question very soon will need to be answered. So.
Yep.
Ms. Emerson.
The idea of a park for the north part would be exciting. I know we talked about this earlier in the year about the shelter houses. A lot of those people that rent those do not live in Raytown, and could we raise the cost for them, or else I would think we'd raise the cost for them and leave the cost as is for the Raytown residents.
Implement a resident, non-resident fee structure.
We've talked about that before, though.
Yes. Yeah. Right. We did the $5 off for residents, and that was, right. Right.
But I thought just to keep the same cost, but raise the people that do not live in Raytown, their cost, and that would generate a little bit of revenue.
Certainly look at that.
Mr. Jason Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to spend too much time on this, because I think we discussed a lot on this, but I wanted to mention, last year one of the concerns I had when I came across the budget process was the outsourcing, if you will, of labor, and I am happy that the Parks Department yourself went along with the decision to hire within and have a self-run Super Splash. I know it's been mentioned up here, but I felt I was pretty vocal last year about that, and I know some other aldermen many others shared my opinion on that, and so I'm really happy you guys went that direction. I also was happy with the strides about the marketing situation that took place. I think that was good. I am concerned that attendance was only slightly better. I do consider this summer to have been more astute, if you will, to swimming outdoors than the summer before. I think it was really wet 2 years ago. I think that was the argument made 2 years ago why the numbers weren't there. And I felt the summer was good for that this year. So I guess I'm happy they were up, but I wish they were obviously more like all of us. I'm really interested in the direction this goes, is what I'm trying to get at. I do think there's been some efforts made and there's some desire made to get this kind of rolling. And I understand what you're saying, and I just wanted to echo this, that there's some tough decisions maybe ahead. I think there's been a lot of things within our capacity that we've been able to do. I mean, the reality is that we live in a quasi-free market society, I mean, people say that, but that's not exactly true. But the reality is, you got Cocoa Key down the street, and that's the problem we're running into now, is that there's competition, and it could be healthy, but the problem is with that is that it does create, some consequences for other programs. Being said, I'm going to kind of move on and I know a fellow alderman may want to bring back the Super Splash stuff, but I have some other questions. I had two other ones by chance. We discussed previously that at Coleman Park, there's There was that possibly that waist-high lighting, if you will. I don't know if you remember the
Pedestal.
conversation. Okay, is that still in the
Pedestal
plan for the
lighting.
works?
There is some money in the park fund budget for next year for park security improvements.
Okay.
We may be able to do some pedestal lighting, some additional video security cameras.
Okay, I didn't
That
know about
type
the
of
cameras at all. Okay, so that's something in addition I've heard. Okay, but I guess am I accurately describing there's like these lighting poles, I guess I want to say, they're kind of like maybe a little bit up to the waist,
Yeah,
perhaps?
they look like a pipe bollard with a light of some type on top.
Okay,
Right.
just to help illuminate that there a little bit.
Right,
All right.
some-
And then I saw something in here that I guess we're kind of going on with. It says right here from previous 2013 to the projected, I guess, next year, 14, 15, whatever. The youth basketball.
Yes.
That's a brand new program because obviously it didn't exist here, and it's $47,000 appropriated towards that. I got two questions about that. Well, one, if you could just briefly describe that to me. And then two, I didn't know if this is something that's kind of been co-opted with the school district perhaps, because I know that that's something that they've brought up recently, and I wasn't sure how they were going to implement it. I thought it was within the schools, but I just didn't know what our role is with that.
That is a partnership agreement with the school district. Dr. Markley has been leading the charge on this, and we are in partnership with them. There will be a youth basketball league offered for, I believe it's 3rd through 6th graders at all the different Raytown schools throughout the fall and winter months, and we are working closely with them on that project. So
Okay.
should be volunteer coaches and volunteer referees. I think the school district is paying for referees and site supervisors and so.
Okay, I just didn't know if that was at the schools or if that was going to be a mixture of parks and schools, or...
We're
is that-
doing the registration portion of it, and the schools are coordinating schedules and site
Okay.
supervisors and so forth.
So what would be the 40, I mean, if you could just briefly describe, what would the 47,000 be for?
That'll be for uniforms for the kids, awards, referee costs, site supervisors. I think we're helping share with some of that.
So supervision predominantly? Okay, well, I mean, and I tell you what, and I'm sure you guys may have already had this conversation, but this league plans to take place during the summer or winter?
It is scheduled for fall and winter months.
Okay, have you, and maybe you already have, and this is just me thinking right now, have you maybe had to try to reach out maybe to some, not only folks that work in the school district, coaches like myself, you know, I was a wrestler, not a basketball player, but, you know, I'd be, you know, more than happy to volunteer my time on a Saturday maybe to come supervise some of these games for free, no charge. I mean, I know the rules of basketball, but, you know, a lot of the other folks, I mean, maybe try to reach out to some folks and see if you can get some maybe volunteers to offset some of these costs.
Sure.
I mean, and I mean, I don't know what you guys are planning on doing with that, but that's something that I would strongly encourage if you haven't
It'll
already.
save some money where they can, yeah.
Yeah, and if you are interested in that, please let me know, because I could probably find you a couple volunteers.
Very good.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kramer.
Well, I'm going to keep my comments brief because everybody's pretty much touched on them. I am in agreement with Alderman Azier and Alderman Urch that Super Splash is a viable part of this community. My thought, and Mr. Azier did a great job of conveying it, every park in this community costs money. And that's what those tax dollars are set aside for, is to be able to have those parks and give kids and families a place to go. And I understand it's an aging park. I do understand we've got Cocoa Keys by there. But it's something that is Raytown's. It belongs to us. And it's something that we can be proud to say that it's operated for a number of years. Realities are realities, but as I said, the reality is every park costs us money, and no park that we have that I can think of, having sat as liaison to the park board, generates revenue. But that's not the purpose of parks. It's not to generate revenue. It's to create recreation for the people of the community. So as far as shelter rates and charging a different rate, we looked at that when I was liaison to the park board with Super Splash. And what you find out is it doesn't generate more revenue. When you compare the costs, say with Super Splash to Cocoa Keys, and you push it up to a Cocoa Keys price, you're not going to draw more people to Super Splash. And as far as shelter rental goes, hey, if they're all rented and we're booked up for the entire summer, why change have a resident, non-resident fee? We want them to be used. That's what they're there for. So that's all I got.
Or build more shelters to generate more revenue. Mr. Green.
Thank you. I'm going to touch on a few things that people have already brought up, and then I'm actually going to bring up something that no one else has ever brought up here. So, all right. First thing first, I just want to make a few comments on Super Splash here. It does pain me it pains me, but it makes me excited at the same time, because the simple fact is we lost a lot more money last year than we did this year. And I know we were aiming for an 85% cost recovery. We ended up getting to 74. That's, I mean, that we didn't reach goal necessarily, but that's still a big improvement over, 47% last year? So that's, a very drastic improvement over last year. That being said, though, I think the bigger underlying issue, and this was touched briefly by Alderman Ertz, is just budget concerns in general. And if parks are losing money, regardless of the Super Splash situation, and Super Splash is hemorrhaging $100,000 a year, and this year was only, 92, which is, a great improvement. But if they're losing money every year, regardless of the Super Splash situation, I hate being the one to say this here, but the question comes down: do we keep hemorrhaging money, or do we try to save the other parks? Now, I want to try to save all parks, including Super Splash. I think Super Splash is very viable to our community. The thing is, I don't want to see all of Parks and Rec go down because we refuse to make the tough decisions. And we're here to make the tough decisions and not the popular ones necessarily. Same goes with the park board, same goes with the Board of Zoning Adjustment, all those. We're here to make the tough decisions. That's our job. And I just want to say that I think we need to look into this farther. I think that Parks needs to look into this farther. And I'm not saying, by all means, I think Super Splash is very viable to our community, and I want to strive to keep it open. But I'm just saying we need to not be afraid to make the tough decisions if we have to. The other thing I want to really touch on here is shelter rentals, because it's been brought up a few times. I think that, they're all, I think I remember you briefly telling us, and you can correct me if you want, Kevin, that at the beginning of the year, when we announced that shelter rentals are actually available, we end up booking it somewhere around 40% of the year on the first day or something like that. It's pretty crazy. Is that roughly right?
Right, it's a high number are booked the first week.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost every weekend, right?
Oh, yeah, they're booked from May through October.
Okay.
Every large shelter.
Okay, and so more shelters would be a good thing. I do agree with that. That being said, until we know the definite future of Super Splash, I don't know if putting a shelter there would necessarily be a good thing. Right. Because if we build a shelter there now, and then in 3 years it turns into an abandoned water park, no one's going to want to go to that shelter, and we're just wasting money. That being said, I think there is a very good opportunity in building a few more shelters in locations that we currently have, or possible other locations we can secure. Mm-hmm. But I think if anything near Super Splash, we need to wait to actually definitely know the future of it. And the third thing that I should say the last thing I want to bring up here, is actually BMX. Mm-hmm. This always gets overlooked. I've never got to take a tour of our BMX. That being said, I've been told it is wonderful by many people. And I know that we're actually working on trying to secure a national race here, which I think is very exciting and a great opportunity. That's something that I think that not only us, but Parks and as well should try to push for, to kind of not only give more recognition to Raytown, but that this is something that we possibly have a niche in here, because we have a really, from what I'm hearing from people, we have a very nice track. We have a very nice essentially we have a really nice facilities there for BMX racing. And so if we can use this as an opportunity to possibly bring more money to the city, I think that's something that we need to push really hard on. And that's my 4 cents there.
Ms. Melson?
I have a couple of questions just for clarification. I tried to write, didn't get it down fast enough. On the youth basketball, there's $47,000 for that program,
Correct.
and that's what the Raytown Parks is putting in? That's the money that's going to be
There'll be
spent?
revenue to offset the 47. We're projecting 47 in revenue, 47 in expenses.
Okay, so even.
Right.
And
You'll
is...
see that under fees on the revenue page. You'll see that under the fees.
Oh, okay.
Miscellaneous fees.
So, since this is part of a school district project,
Right.
are they putting money towards this?
I believe they are in terms of site supervision and some other expenditures, the maintenance side of it from janitorial and so forth. I don't have the details tonight, but I'll be happy to get that for you
Okay.
tomorrow.
And so is it a collaborative program, where both of the names are on the same line, or is it mostly the Raytown Parks program?
It's mostly a Raytown Parks program, but it's in conjunction with the Education First Foundation as well as the C2 School District.
Okay.
All three
And
are
so-
partnering.
And so with that, all the volunteers and coaches and people that will be in the building with the children, are they going to have background checks?
Yes, they will. That's a requirement, and National Youth Sports Coaches Association training as well.
And is that something that Raytown Parks is going to pay for that?
I think that's included in that budget, if I'm
Oh,
not
so it is
mistaken.
included in the 47?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so there
For
is
each
a
coach.
volunteer application process?
Yes.
Background checks have to be done before they're allowed?
Yes.
And all that kind of stuff? And that's through your national, what'd you say?
Youth Sports Coaches Association, NYSCA.
Okay, okay. And so additionally and you said that 47 was for awards, uniforms,
Right,
ref
uniforms,
fees?
awards, ref fees, site supervision costs, maintenance expenses.
Okay.
Any other costs that go with the program.
Okay, but you really feel that with this program, and again, it's coming back online, and this will be the first year to
Mhm.
break even with that program?
That's our plan.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Azier?
I want to address two things. I want to go back, again, to Super Splash. I remember 3 years ago when the Park Department came to the board and said that there's no way that they could open because of whatever they needed to bring in a management team to run it outside. And I remember that very well because at the time I just thought, I can't see any way that this is going to work. And it really didn't, because during that time there were a lot of problems, hit the newspapers, et cetera, but at the end of 2 years that we had that management, we actually lost a lot of money because of the management, and that was a park board decision. That was their decision. They brought that to us, and I know that there were others beside myself that couldn't see how it was going to work, and it didn't. And I do have a question. What was the total attendance this year? Do you have those figures with you?
Yes, I do. The total attendance is 25,935. 25,935. Up 1,468 over last year, 6%.
So roughly almost 26,000 people used that park in the summertime.
Correct.
Which was the shortest period, because actually the other parks were being used all the way from May to October probably. So to me, that's a huge number. And I'm going to go back to what Josh said, Alderman Green, is that, yeah, it's a tough decision. It was an easy decision to say we should bring somebody else in to run it for us, and then we lost money. And now the toughest thing is to open ourselves and make it work, which I think that was this board's kind of insisted this year, that this is what we really ought to do, and you did it, and it was a good decision. So I just going back to the plan that what I'm seeing coming from the park department, because I know what what your needs are, as the mayor's does. There's a lot of things that have to be repaired for you to open next year that you won't be able to do with a budget like this.
Right.
And so theoretically, 26,000 people that use our parks wouldn't be using a park next year if it doesn't open. And that bothers me a lot. And I got to think that I bet you, and I might be wrong, that if you put all the other parks together, they don't have 26,000 occupants all year long. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but we don't have numbers to substantiate that. Here's the next question about basketball. So do you anticipate making, are you going to pay rental to the school district for the gyms?
No, the school district has agreed to pick up the cost for that. It's my understanding.
Okay, that's what the question. So theoretically, you really ought to be making money on basketball.
That's our hope.
Right. I know that when the Y did it, they made money on it.
Right.
It brought revenue in. So I just
Correct.
wanted to share that with the rest of the board. I think they did very well on it because I remember they ended up swapping pool time for bass, so I knew a little bit about it because it was always in our pool agreement, the use of the gym. So they did very well. So that would be, I'm hoping that the park board is going to bring back a plan to keep this park open for us, and that's not included in the budget. So unless I see something,
That decision was made by the governance committee. The pool will open in 2015.
It will open.
That decision was made.
But the governance committee doesn't make that decision.
No, but the recommendation goes to the park board.
It's the park board that makes that decision, not the governance committee. Mr. Kramer. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Right,
Avery.
I hope that we're going to, I mean, before I vote to support this budget, I'd want some kind of a secure answer on that.
Mr. Kramer.
Well, Mr. Asher brought up about bringing in the pool management team, but as I recall, we had a resignation of a key employee that ran Super Splash, and we had to scramble in order to make sure that the pool did open. And I just realized I had my mic off, but the pool management team, it wasn't, if I remember correct, Kevin, wasn't it a couple weeks before we were, 2 to 4 weeks before we were to open, that we had a resignation of
That's correct.
Dave, whatever, I can't remember his last name, but that's neither here nor there. So that was a last-minute decision.
That's correct.
To be able to open the park. That wasn't a decision to go that direction because of revenue. As Mr. Asher said, 26,000 people visited that park just this year.
10 years ago, we had 73,000.
Yeah.
5 years ago, we were at 46,000.
Right. Right. And competition has driven a lot of that. And,
Right.
and as we talked about, taking a good hard look at attractions that'll get people into the park and increase that. But still, even at a declining rate, 26,000 people use that park. And, you know, I'll go back to what I said before. The levy, the portion of the levy and sales tax that goes to the Parks Department goes to operate all parks. And as Mr. Ertz astutely pointed out, it is the only park that has a P&L statement. And for those that don't know what that is, that's a profit and loss statement. Yeah. And I'm certain that if we were to have a P&L statement for each individual park, we would find that they all cost us money. Mm-hmm. And they don't generate funds, but that's what the tax dollars are there for.
The intent is to improve the quality of life for residents.
Sure.
It helps improve, I mean, I could sit here all night and talk about the benefits of parks and recreation, but the key is parks help improve property values. Parks provide a place for people to get away and relax. They improve your community. And you know, I'll stop there. But
well, but that's an excellent point. Mm-hmm. And if we're really going to start crunching numbers to the point where we're looking at closing Super Splash, then I would want to see a P&L statement. I don't want to micromanage parks, but I'd like to see a P&L statement for each individual park and look at the costs of snow removal, of cutting grass, of everything else in comparison to what shelter rental is. So that's all I got.
Mr. Ertz, I'm about ready to close discussion. Mr. Ertz, did you want to say anything?
You had some people down there who want me to.
Sometimes they yield to you, sometimes they don't, so I never really
Okay.
know.
Yeah, the committee has met, and the committee had a great meeting, perhaps excerpts of that can be shown later, about the super splash problem, and about, we try to stay on task, but as liaison to the Parks Department also, the park board, I got the definite impression that they wanted to keep that park open. They realize, as the mayor said, it may look a little different down the road and things need to be done, but however, the best step they could come up with until after the budgets are done and we can take a hard look at revenue coming in, and the final numbers from Super Splash have not been churned out yet. I think the final expenses are coming down. We didn't quite have them at that meeting. But there will be some decisions made. Their best bet at that time, I believe, is what they were voting on that night, was to keep the park open for another year and to decide. It may be a proposal to the taxpayers to say that this is what we think that the people would want, or for a study, or to see whatever could happen. But there's a lot of things on the table, and there's a lot of things in motion. And I too hope the park stays, we can keep the amenities up at all of our parks in the city of Raytown. So thank you.
Mr. Van Buskirk.
I think I'm in agreement with, I believe, everyone on our board that Super Splash is certainly an important part of our park system. And in fact, important part of our parks on the north end of town. We have that and Carnegie over there. I'm curious, how do our fees there compare to Cocoa Key? We've had some discussion about that. How do they compare?
Daily admission for Super Splash is $9. Daily admission, I believe, at Cocoa Keys is 10, if I'm not mistaken. I need to go back and check on that, but so we're a little bit lower. We try to stay competitive. Now this year, the Bay, which is about 5 years old, offered a buy one get one opportunity. Hard to compete with that. They are $6 admission.
And of course, they can afford to do that because they're bringing people into their hotel,
right,
and their restaurants, and
right.
So, whereas, and it's been said several times tonight, but our park system's really not there to produce revenue. That's not what it's about. And as I look at the fees and services here and what that revenue that comes off of those, it's not a lot other than for Super Splash. And
right.
It's rather significant there. Certainly, we're not quite breaking even, but if we needed to get to that point where we had to, then I would think a fee increase might be appropriate for those who are using the facility. But of course, as you said a while ago, really our park system is there for our citizens to use, utilize, and I hope that we can do that. I think, upkeep is obviously a very important part of it. As the mayor was stating, if we aren't willing to put out the expenditures to do that, then it would be difficult to keep the facility open. I have to ask a question. I have noticed the shingles talking about shelter houses, on the shelter house at Carnegie. For quite some time now, on the north side of that, there are shingles off of that shelter house. What is happening there?
There was storm damage in the storm that hit Raytown July 30th. We're currently waiting for the insurance company to approve proposals to replace that deck, the shingles on that shelter.
Okay. I was just curious about that. Well, I hope we can keep the facility open. I think it's an important part of our park structure. And and there are other people certainly that come in and use it other than Raytown residents. They're paying a fee. When they come in and use the other parks, quite often they don't pay a fee. We don't collect anything, and there are certainly a lot of people who are not citizens of our community that come in and use our other parks.
Correct.
Frequently. So, all right, thank you.
All right, a lot of discussion.
Point of clarification, really quick. I just want to let you guys know, Cocoa Keys, $19.50 is the admission price. I just wanted to-
$19.50.
Yeah, he asked, and so I just decided to look it up.
All right, great.
Please don't.
Real quick.
I promise to be real quick, but
Finish.
think about this. What other park, other than Super Splash, offers the opportunity for fitness and wellness more than Super Splash does?
Yeah, no argument, but we're going to finish this discussion. Kevin, I think you've heard from myself and the board on a number of things. Let's make sure we're instituting good business practices. If we've got a demand out there, we have a demand for shelter houses. The old theory of supply and demand, when I took my business classes, you might have an opportunity to raise the fees. You might have an opportunity to do more shelters to get more fees. Let's look at that. We've talked about it. We've talked about it. We've talked about it. But I do think before I approve or before I put my stamp on this budget, I want to know what business plan you have in place for parks, for Super Splash. Specifically, what capital improvements do you plan to make? What maintenance improvements need to happen? Because we're out there, we toured, we saw things that were not operational. They're not in use. Therefore, the citizens can't use those facilities.
Right.
We're going to continue to take things out of operation. There's going to be fewer people going. I don't have to be much of a business major to figure out where that thing's going to go. So let's see a plan that causes Super Splash to succeed rather than a plan that causes it to fail. Because everybody on this board has said they want this to continue to be an amenity. I am certainly one of those. Done with that. Done with any other questions on parks? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. That was a long 10 minutes, but something that needed to get out, I think. Mahesh, do you want to address the remainder of that of the mayor, board, and alderman, administrative, and finance? 15 minutes. Thanks, Kevin.
Good evening, Mayor Bauer, Board of Aldermen again. Maybe it's appropriate time that I would ask Ben to give a brief, and brief is the key, overview of the various funds that the city has. Obviously, you will have that information for about a month, and we would welcome any questions if you have. But I think it makes perfect sense to go over the various funds and how they function. Ben?
Thank you, Mahesh. Just again, brief. You have 4 separate categories, if you will, of funds that are a part of this budget. One's a general fund. Obviously, it's part of the overall operating. It's where basically the catch-all. If it's not a specific revenue source or a specific purpose, it goes in the general fund. The second one is the special revenue fund, where the revenues are dedicated for a specific purpose, either by law or by obligation that you've set. For instance, park, you just got done talking about transportation sales tax, capital sales tax, and so forth. The next one is a capital projects fund that Mr. Knoll had mentioned was where grants or proceeds of certain bond issues might be accounted for, and then the construction of those long-term assets are accounted for. And then finally is enterprise fund. Sanitary sewer obviously is one of which. There's a number of communities that have water, electric funds, and solid waste funds themselves. Those are basically the 4 different types of funds. The overall budget that's proposed tonight is just over $29 million. The biggest portion, the biggest single fund, obviously, is the general fund.
Contemplating a budget annually is probably one of the biggest policy decisions you make. And I had the privilege of being at your retreat, and you're grappling with issues, obviously, that many, many communities continue to grapple with, how to fund parks, how to continue to fund streets and improvements in economy where costs are going up and resources are going down, and getting strategic with some of those. If there's any questions, obviously, I'm here to answer them. Mahesh has my email address if you've got a need to drop me an email or give me a phone call. So, Mayor, perfect timing.
Perfect. Any questions? No questions. You guys exhausted yourself on the last one. Mr. Ertz.
I was just going to thank you for helping out, and did you looking for, are we in session to adjourn, or is this?
I don't know. I didn't even officially adjourn it last time, so we still got to do Mahesh yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I don't know why you'd want to cut out the city administrator, but I'm sure it wasn't intentional.
All right, good evening, Mayor Bauer, Board of Aldermen. Very briefly, I'm going to touch few funds. Number one is administration. Along with everybody else, I will go with 1-3-1 approach. One of the biggest accomplishment that we have achieved last year was a project that was long overdue, almost 40 plus years, was the city's codification, a full-blown, full review of the city's code. That was completed, and to me, it was the biggest achievement, and we now need to continue to do it every 10 years or so. Another thing with the budget I focused this year was employees. Obviously, employees are the biggest asset of any organization, and the team of employees that we have at City Hall is also dedicated to the work they provided in the circumstances and conditions with literally almost like no pay raises. The only pay raise we have given was a couple of years ago was 3%. Couple times we have given a 1% as a lump sum amount, but there are 3 years gone by we have not given any raise. So in 5 years in total, a 3% raise and a twice 1% kind of lump sum. Therefore, this year's budget, I'm proposing a 4% increase across the board, and as this budget also include the professional development plan. So the employee who are receiving that adjustment will not be part of 4%. 4% will be applicable to all full-time as well as regular part-time employees. Those employees who are for or under the probationary period, they will receive the 4% increase at the completion of their probationary period. The budget we provided is fully balanced budget. I have also kept the best interest of the residents. A number of things that proposed in this budget also include no sewer rate increase, and this is 4th year in a row that there is not going to be any increase in their sewer rate. Along with the no sewer rates, there are a number of programs for the resident that I will be going in detail during my presentation during the final budget adoption. Also, this budget is a fiscally prudent budget. As you will see from last 3 years, our revenue, as you heard during the presentation, has been down. So revenue has been down, but you look at the balances, they're up, increasing. The only way you can achieve it is through gaining the efficiency, using the technology, creating productivity, and less workforce. And you will find that. Then another thing we focused was the idea after the goal-setting session and some of the issues that we discussed. Obviously, we can't include all, but as you saw with the 83rd Street Bridge, as you saw with the street lights, we tried to include some of the item that was discussed. What we need to be ensuring in the future, obviously the challenge is not over by any means, is we wanted to focus on how we can enhance our revenue. Whether it's economic development or other means, that is going to be a challenge. Without revenue increase, there is only thing you can trim up to a certain level. Only employee can do without getting burnout. And therefore, the focus for the future challenge would be what we can do to enhance our revenue. So those are the 313-131 item for administration. Actually, I use that phrase with the 311 that you can dial, and I just changed it a little bit. Citywide, in that fund, we have included expenditure for newsletter. I heard you loud and clear that this is one of the item feedback that you have provided me that we need to continue to do. And not only we need to continue to do, we also increase the frequency of that. As you heard during the presentation, our goal is to get at least 50% expenditure through the advertisement, and I'm sure we are going to get there. We have also included a neighborhood revitalization program. That is one of the grants that we are going to apply for. But before we do that, we got to do certain things. And our hope is once we get that, that particular program will complement neighborhood service, stabilization program, dangerous building demolition program, that will complement with other improvements that we are going through the capital improvement program. As you also heard during a couple of other presentations regarding the online payment, yes, we have used the technology in past few years, and we will continue to utilize those, so that is in our pipeline. The budget documents that you have is, what I call is a roadmap. You look at it and you figure out where this city is going to go, what direction, what are the things that is listed. And as I was in the beginning, at the opening remark I made, everyone, every department head, their supporting staff has worked on this document. This is one of the easiest budget in terms of understanding what it is. It's not complex. It goes through details of, $100 level of detail. But the point is everybody looked at it to the point where what can be done to minimize the expenditure? What can we do to increase efficiency? And what application we can fill out to receive funding from other sources. If I just try to list the accomplishment that we have in the last 7 years, even 2 hours won't be enough. But a lot of things we do behind the scene and the staff that is involved is unbelievable. I will be touching some of those during the presentation on October 7th. And meanwhile, my hope is if you have any question or concern, you will send me via email. That way, I'll get the response from my staff, myself, or Ben, and then deliver that email to the entire board so that we are not repeating the same question or repeating the answers to everyone. At the end, I do want to thank Ben and my entire team here. Even though we are without the finance director, I think it's amazing when you see the document, compilation of the documents. And yes, this is a draft. We have already found a few things that needs to be tweaked. That's what we are going to do. But at the end, you will be pleased the direction that the city is going and the various accomplishments that this team has achieved. With that, I will open up any question you may have.
Any questions for our most favorite city administrator? Ms. Melson.
I actually don't have any questions.
Okay, next.
That might be a surprise. But I really want to applaud Mahesh and the whole city staff team for the work that you guys did together on putting this document. It is easy to understand. I do like the 131 aspect of it, the more concise presentation of the material. And, you know, that was kind of something that, you know, I was ready to write away, as I always done for the last 15 years, and send all my questions out, but I really didn't have a whole lot. And I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that's been put through here, being able to find that money through the different departments, for them searching for the 4% raise and being able to do that. I think that's going to be a tremendous boost to the city. And so I just commend all the staff that's put this together.
Well stated. Mr. Green?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say three things really quick. Firstly, I can't tell you how glad I am to hear the 4% raise. Phenomenal, because we have some great employees up here, and they deserve that. Secondly, also, it's great to hear about the frequency of newsletters going up, because honestly, ever since we started that program, that is one of the biggest things that people are just so excited about, those newsletters. Having some kind of communication, some kind of, you know, something from the city, essentially, letting them know what's going on, you know, essentially where their money's going. They're so ecstatic to get those. And thirdly, and this is more just for all city staff in general, I do want to say thank you very much. This has been a very easy document to read, like Ms. Melson was saying that, and also I've actually, most of you today, I came in and knocked on your door and came in and actually asked you a few questions myself concerning this. And anytime I always have a question concerning anything or any policy or, you know, a budget item, doors are always open, and I'm, you know, always welcomed, and essentially my thoughts are always heard. So I just want to thank you guys.
Mr. Azier?
I find it quite interesting that over the years, this binder is 1/3 as thick it was 2 years ago. Yet all the categories are there, all the figures are there. It's easy to understand and ask questions about. Is that by whose design, Mahesh? Was that yours or the finance director's?
Go ahead and grab
Actually,
it, Mahesh. Take it when you can get it.
Thank you.
What was a fair question? Because I think it's kind of a phenomenon, really.
Yeah, I think every time you have a finance director, they bring their own flavor to, and you know, Jeremy was excellent during the composition of his book, and when Mark got on board, there was an expectation to simplify the budget. We have heard from some residents who came and spoke, so he made an effort to make it such as it's easy to understand. So
right, and
we took the ball, whatever the foundation Mark laid, and we just didn't want to change anything this year, so we continued his effort.
16 years ago, every department had their own format, and
That's
you had all
correct.
different. It was like a haunted house. Really.
Seven years ago, that was the case.
Yeah, and so it's really come a long way, but this is really an excellent job, and but specifically because it's got everything the other ones did before, but it's all compiled. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Van Buskirk.
Mahesh, I too want to thank you for your leadership and the great job you and your staff have done. I have an inside scoop that actually, while all of us was enjoying our Labor Day weekend or holiday, this gentleman was working. And, you know, I know today I had a number of questions for you regarding the budget that you answered for me. I appreciate your willingness to be available to us and your open door policy. Thank you.
And you were not the only one. It was unstoppable. So.
Mr. Mock.
Oh, man. Okay.
You done?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Hold your horses.
Get it out.
Okay, just say it. Honestly, with yourself, you know, and staff and everything, but there's a huge item people always forget is the employees of City Hall. And a huge thanks goes to them also. So, but other than that, thanks a lot, guys, for another year.
Ms. Emerson.
And I know it's been awfully difficult with Mark leaving, and I do appreciate everything you and the staff have done to get the budget together.
I want to make sure we leave some comments for when we actually vote on this too, so we, save up some of the accolades, you guys.
If you want, I can review the finance department budget.
Do you have anything else you want to add to your report, Mahesh? Seriously.
No, I will leave it for the October 7th.
All right. Very good. No other questions? Let's, since we had an official introduction, official start of the meeting, let's have an official adjournment to this board hearing as well. And Jason, you had asked for the motion to be made this time, as I recall.
I imagine you recall correctly.
And Ms. Emerson, you went out of the way to call me and ask for the second on this one tonight. So, yeah, so we've got a motion and a second to adjourn this particular budget meeting. I thank them both for the wanting to take this step forward to make those motions. And all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. I was gambling. I gambled.